On today's World Insight, China's bleeding tourism industry slowly springing back to life. The vital signs of China's biggest online travel agency.
Yeah, travel is the worst hit industry during the pandemic.
While Chinese cities pick up the pieces after bringing the outbreak under heel, is an economic surge in sight? The answers from a respected Chinese economist.
Yes, this is the first time our graduate students are having difficulty to find a job.
And division in the face of a common deadly viral enemy. What can help spark global cooperation against the pandemic? A Columbia University professor with his insight.
Just desperately trying to shift responsibility for the terrible epidemic that is raging in the United States out of control.
Here is our host, Tian Wei.
Hello, I'm Tian Wei, and this is World Insight. We begin today's program with COVID-19's blow to the economy. Worldwide, the number of confirmed infections is more than 3 million and is still on the rise. As the coronavirus spread under control in China already, the country's hard-hit tourism is poised for a gradual recovery. The upcoming Labor Day holiday is expected to see a record number of 80 million tourists. Numbers from Trip.com, a major online travel platform, show the coming holiday from May the 1st to the 5th, a traffic surge of 353% over the same period in April. So how will the tourism industry pick up the pieces after the COVID-19 outbreak? How can businesses make smart policies together with policymakers? For answers about that, I spoke to Trip.com's CEO Jane Sun. Let's listen in to what she had to say. We've been constantly talking to one another over the past 100 days during the pandemic. Your business, travel, hotel, also airplanes have been very much impacted by it. What about now with the latest news that Beijing actually is open?
Yeah, travel is the worst hit industry during the pandemic. So for us, the first most important thing is taking care of our customers during the time when the country was locked down. That gradually, I think we see positive impact through different measures implemented by the government. So now many of the cities have 0 newly infected people. And yesterday, the government unleashed the energy in Beijing, which will probably account for 30% of the total capacity for aviation industry. We are very positive about the move. So today we saw search volume is coming up. May holiday, Labor Day demand is increasing quite a lot.
We all witnessed the celebration online when the news was being released yesterday. And now we have been hearing that the volume of traveling has really increasing, almost revengeful, as some say. Is it true? What is the latest number you are having on hand?
Yeah, some of our brands has experienced 15x the volume,
wow.
Which is very encouraging. So I think the aviation industry in particular is the leading indicator for any travel destinations, hotels, and attractions. And we can see because the capital of China accounts for a lot for business travelers, for leisure travelers. The fact that the government opened up the city of Beijing, reduced the requirement for quarantine 14 days for anyone going into Beijing is a very positive move. And I'm sure it's going to contribute positively for the Chinese GDP as well as the travel industry.
Jane, but this time it's a little bit different. Remember SARS? I mean, after that, people are having a celebration and they want to celebrate life, they want to travel, they want to see the world. But this time, we all know there's likely to be a second wave during the winter time. So how about travel industry preparation for it?
There are hundreds of scientists and medical personnel investing their time and efforts to develop medicine and vaccine, which we're very hopeful as well.
Right. Of course, Jane, your platform is linking all the important factors of the travel industry together. But at the same time, for aviation, for example, people are traveling through planes, and there is a much bigger possibility of transmission, for example, in a concealed space like inside a plane. So responsibility are so high these days in a pandemic. How to protect the customers? It should not be directly your job, but I'm sure as a platform always playing your social responsibility very strongly in your practice. How do you look at those factors?
I think we need to control the virus in a very smart way without impacting too much on the economy. A person who is healthy in Shanghai will be healthy in Beijing, or will be healthy in Sanya. So we shouldn't impose the regional restrictions. So what we are appealing to the government is have one unified health code. So if that person has a green health code in Beijing or in Shanghai, he or she shouldn't be quarantined again when he traveled to Sichuan, for example, travel to Guangzhou, for example. Because quarantining a healthy person doesn't really add too much for the control of the disease. However, it will negatively impact people's lives and business community and economic development. So we need to be very careful not to control the virus in fear of uncertainty. We need to be making sure we have measures in place to identify who are the healthy people and allow them to travel within China without imposing too much restriction. So the economy is preserved. We are advising the customers in a couple of different ways. One is post what are the countries area which imposes restrictions for travel. Secondly, we advise people to wear masks, to wear gloves to a certain degree, so they protect themselves, they also protect their families when they travel.
Trip.com Group has been struggling together with almost all the industries in the world in the middle of this pandemic, but you are almost the messenger in a way about the economy, because you know when people's interest of traveling is up, businesses are almost back on track. So Jane, tell me more about what is the signs that you're reading right now?
What we have seen is the demand is very strong. People have been locked down in their home, in their office for 2 months. Now there is a huge demand from leisure travelers. They want to go out, enjoy the spring, enjoy the summer. And also for business community, we have been doing Zoom conference for a long time. And there is a need to face-to-face and make sure we move further. So I think the demand is very strong. And in terms of supply badly needs the business. If you go to the hotels, if you go to the airports, majority of these areas are empty. So we are linking our customers with the hotels and airlines by offering the discount for certain hotels. Hopefully we will encourage people to travel. So the first volume will increase with a good discounted price. And gradually with the increased volume, hopefully the price will also recover. So I think the government also needs to be very encouraging for the recovery of the business and implement very wise measures.
You and your business partner, James Liang, have been making tremendous effort, just like business people around the world over the past 100 days, trying to figure out ways to survive and when it comes, thrive again. We even saw, pictures of James in different costumes at different parts of China trying to promote, tourism packages. What do you think you have learned through this surviving period of time over the past 100 days?
I think compared to the other OTAs, Trip.com probably is the best positioned OTA in the whole world, because China relatively is very effective in controlling the virus. So we'll be able to capitalize on our advantages. And secondly, this is the time to test our leadership, test our creativity. So to an extent, we can take the leadership, encourage the market to be creative, linking our customers to our suppliers. We will give 100% efforts to it.
Jason, the CEO of Trade.com Group. Still to come on our program later today. Chinese cities pick up the pieces seeking a reboot of the economy after bringing the outbreak under heel. Is an economic surge in sight? The answers from respected Chinese economists right after this break from Peking University. I'm Tian Wei, and this is World Insight. As China brings COVID-19 cases come under control, local governments have taken policies to encourage consumers to shop and travel more to start the economy. China seeks to speed up building new infrastructures to amid rising downside pressure. So, could a surge in domestic demand save the day, or would the surge ever happen? I posed these questions to Yao Yang, Dean and Professor at the National School of Development from Peking University. Our conversation starts with the spring blooms in the beautiful garden on the campus. The so-called new infrastructure building.
All right.
Now, of course, that's a terminology. It has a lot to do with building infrastructure related to technology, related to 5G information and things like that. How would that work, particularly for the short term?
Well, I think this is what the central government is doing, right? So this is a technology-oriented, particular 5G infrastructure. I think that's good for the long run. But if you go down to the cities, I don't think they are going to do only new technology, right? They are going to build highways, build bridges, build subways. Those conventional infrastructures.
Earlier, there was the case of a so-called revenge consumption, right? After, for example, health hazard or other issues, people come out in abundance and try to consume because they really enjoyed it. Right. But this time it's going to be different because we still do not know.
Yeah, that's a puzzle. Let's just think about the SARS. After SARS, there was really a revenge consumption. We observed that. Before this, I also said, no worry, we're going to have revenge consumption. But no, we haven't seen that.
What about the job market?
The job market is not very good, and I believe we are going to face even more severe situation because we are going to have 6 million university graduates who are going to find a job.
Including some of your students.
Yes, this is the first time our graduate students are having difficulty to find a job. 2 of my master students have decided to postpone their graduation.
So even from the best school, university here in China, right. From one of the most well-known institutions here in this school, they have difficulties.
That's right, that's right.
But what about the job market in the country? Of course, we still do not have likely the prediction because things are still evolving. But Professor Yao, what is likely to be the number? We have to be prepared.
Yeah, if you look at the official number, unemployment rate only increased a little bit. I think the key issue here is consumption. This time is very different than the conventional slowdown. China has never experienced the drop of consumption. We have had waves of slowdown, but consumption never declined. But this time you look at the retail, it declined by 19% in the first quarter. That's a huge decline. So this means you don't have demand. If you don't have demand, then companies, particularly those smaller companies that don't have orders, and they're not going to hire people. right? So there is a chain reaction over there.
Professor Yao, there are different government policies if you look around the world. They try to save the small and medium-sized companies. They try to make sure companies and businesses still keep their people on the job. They have different policies. What do you make of China's approach so far? And how is it compare to some of the other economies?
Well, compared with other countries, China has been quite conservative, I would say. I think that the U.S. Fed started this unlimited QE again, right? I think that's really a bad idea. Of course, this is an emergency action to stop the crash of the stock market. That worked. So the American stock markets, you can see, still growing a little bit, right? Or recovery from this crash. But that's not going to help the economy, right? Because the economy has stopped.
So you're saying the U.S. has been overreacting?
Yes, definitely. I think this is a really bad idea. It's not going to be good for American economy in the long run.
Why not?
Well, it means United States is going to accumulate more debts. Okay, think about this. In the U.S., on average, each American now has a debt of about $70,000 U.S. dollars.
Already?
Yeah, already. And this is growing, right? So think about it, in 2 or 3 generations, what's going to happen in the United States, right? You are eating up the future generations, right? So this is just a totally careless, reckless action, okay?
But China will probably build it, right? China will buy the debts, the U.S. debts. It has always been, and so it's betting on China to do the same again.
Exactly, exactly. So China in the short run is losing, right? We are paying the bills for the United States. But in the long run, United States is losing assets to China and other countries who buy American bonds. Okay. So, you know, from the United States perspective, I think the Fed is killing United States.
And how is China going to deal with that?
For China, probably we don't have a choice because we use a lot of American dollars to do our business. Right? So what do we do with the American dollars? Right? So we have to recycle them back to the United States. And it sounds still like American federal bonds are still the safest assets that China can buy.
So this is going to continue, right? The U.S. will do whatever it wants to do, I mean, to its utmost interest for now. And then the rest of the world, China particularly, foot the bills.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's another reason why I believe this is a really bad policy, because it's doing redistribution in the United States and over the whole world, right? So unlimited QE pump up the stock market, and who benefits from this? Those guys in Wall Street. Those guys have never been punished. They were not punished after 2008, and this time they're going to gain again, right? So there is a huge amount of redistribution in this process. The Wall Street is a redistribution machine. Okay, this is so bad for the United States and for the whole world.
But what about the policies? For example, every citizen or everyone inside the United States will get a federal funding for about $1,200. And also to encourage small and medium-sized companies to let them, you know, to apply to the banks, even though the speed could be very slow in terms of action. So what do you make of this, and how is China compared to that? And not only it's just U.S., there's also Europe. Some of the European countries are doing different things.
Well, as emergency action, I fully agree. As a matter of fact, in China, I also encourage the government to do the same, because we have so many people who cannot find a job, right? This is an external shock. No one predicted, and no one could have prevented, right? So This is a necessary step to maintain a normal living standard, particularly for the poor people who don't have a lot of savings. Cities are issuing those consumption coupons, right? So that's very different from cash transfer. Cash transfer means you just give people cash, right? So, and people can decide what they want to buy. Consumption coupon means they actually have a target consumption. Okay. As a matter of fact, most cities use the coupon as a discount coupon. For example, you spend 500 yuan, you're going to get 100 back, right? I don't think that's a very good policy. Probably a better policy is to name the commodities, like cars, like durable goods, other durable goods, like a refrigerator or things. So if you buy, I'm going to give you a coupon, and the coupon says this is 500 or 1,000. If you buy a refrigerator, you can use this to pay. So this is more psychological. Okay, so people will say, oh, I have this coupon that worth 1,000 yuan, so I have to use it. But if you say, oh, if you have to buy a refrigerator, then I'm going to give you back this 1,000. Then people
That's
say,
very different.
Yeah, psychologically that's different. In fact, that's not different, but I think there is a psychological effect.
Many, as a result of the quarantine and the social distancing, many of the migrant workers who used to work in Beijing, for example, cannot come into Beijing anymore, right? The localities where these migrant workers originally come from will have to absorb all of these people and try to provide jobs to them. Otherwise, they don't have income. Professor Yao, particularly if we see, cautious measures still have to be taken. We still cannot have so many people circling around the country anytime they want, wherever they want to go. So what would that mean for central-local relationship and also for relationship between different localities here in this country, Professor?
In this process, actually, different cities, different provinces have adopted different policies, right? So we haven't seen a unified national policy, although the central government now is trying to enforce a uniform nationwide policy. I think the national policy should be like this. So we're going to have this uniform called green label, right? So everyone use their mobile phone and just swipe. There's a label, and if this is green, then you pass. I believe the central government is trying to do this. If we can enforce this national policy, that's going to be much, much better.
The green label that he's been talking about is a sign that you could have on your smartphone. If you haven't been to some of the places where there were outbreaks of COVID-19, then you're going to have the green sign on your smartphone, the green label. More than 1 million confirmed cases of coronavirus infections have been reported in the U.S., according to Johns Hopkins University's tally. The U.S. Federal Reserve says the pandemic has already caused a tremendous economic hardship, and the worst has yet to come. So, can the U.S. economy rise from the ashes, and what does that mean for the other economies, China included? And how is cooperation between China and the U.S. from now on amid all of these complexities of geopolitics? Professor Yao also shed some light on this. The pandemic might be the top concern now, but that is not the only issue that we have to deal with. Now, we don't want to forget, before the outbreak, there was the China-US trade dispute. There's the first phase and the second phase already. So how, when dust somewhat settled down, will the original important structural issues coming back? And how will the Chinese economy adjust to that while trying to cater to the evolving situations you just mentioned about the pandemic?
Well, the first phase agreement was a very good one. This is solved the so-called trade imbalances issues, right? I think it's beneficial to both countries. not just United States, but also China. For example, China is going to have another stable source of oil supply. The second phase talk is going to be very difficult, but I more see it as an opportunity for China to participate in rule making in the world. Okay, how to interpret this? Right? United States or the Trump administration does not like the current WTO framework. It wants to have a reform on WTO. If the United States does not participate in the reform process, the reform is not going to go anywhere. U.S. is still the most powerful country in the world. But the United States wants to talk with China. Okay? That gives China opportunity to get into this process. My prediction, and we can test it after 1 or 2 years, okay? If China and the United States has a serious talk about the rules, right, and then those rules are going to become a template for WTO reform. That means that China will become a significant actor in the reform process of WTO.
Now, look at the Chinese economic structure. Does it give China much confidence if things are getting worse, whether as a result of trade war or as a result of the pandemic closing down borders between economies and among economies?
Well, I think the closing down of the borders is only temporary.
Yes, indeed.
Actually, China has a first mover advantage. China has already got more than 1 month to resume production. So, for example, I have a student working in Suzhou, and he told me actually Suzhou is gaining back some of the industries that had already moved out of China. So those industries came back to China again.
Because of the change.
Yeah, right. So I actually don't worry about China's position. People say, oh, industries are leaving China, there is a de-Sinolization in China. No, I don't believe that.
There is one crucial point between China and the United States, technologies.
Right.
Some even say if there were a Cold War between China and the United States, it will be about technologies at least. So as a Chinese economist, how do you look at that possibility and the realities of technologies, decoupling, and also the difficulties of cooperation at least?
We do innovations in many ways. Of course, in the past, we learned from the United States quite a lot, but the world is big enough. We can cooperate with Western Europe and other countries. Okay? So there's still a large room over there. And also because economic ties are still there, so commodities are still flowing across borders. And from that, we can also learn. Okay? And don't forget about China's own strengths. As a matter of fact, some of the areas China already has a leading edge. And the United States and Europe, in some areas, actually depends on China. Okay? So with that, yes, there is a decoupling in technology, but I don't think we are going to live in a completely two parallel world.
My exclusive interview with Professor Yao Yang earlier. You're watching World Insight, still to come on the program today. Division in the face of a common deadly viral enemy. What can help spark global cooperation against a pandemic? Columbia University scholar Jeffrey Sachs with his insights right after this break. Welcome back. Amid the global pandemic, nationalist sentiment in the U.S. is rising. That, according to some of the scholars we've been talking to, public health issues are seen and even amplified through geopolitical and electoral lessons. Earlier, I talked to Jeffrey Sachs, a professor of economics and director of the Center for Sustainable Development from Columbia University. He said he's unsatisfied with the U.S. administration's response to the pandemic because it didn't act quickly enough and then shift the blame on other countries and even international organizations. He also called for stepping up global efforts to contain the coronavirus. Take a listen.
Of course, what Trump is trying to do is to shift the blame for the United States' failure to control the epidemic to WHO or to China or to anyone that he can do so, because he does not think properly. He does not think honestly. He is just desperately trying to shift responsibility for the terrible epidemic that is raging in the United States out of control.
What are some of the sources that the White House would get in terms of evaluating a virus or a public health related issue, Professor?
Well, there are many experts in the United States. Our country is filled with scientific expertise. It just depends on whether the government listens to expertise or not. And right now, for many, many weeks, Trump has said he's going to decide these things. And he says ridiculous things, I'm afraid. Very unfortunate, because we have a lot of expertise in the United States, in our schools of public health, in our government institutions. There are many fine scientists. But it requires that the government apparatus give authority to and listen to the expertise. And if a politician like Trump, who doesn't understand very much of anything, decides to make decisions on his own or to make statements that are absolutely without a scientific basis, the whole country gets in trouble. This is a matter of leadership, but the right kind of leadership empowers expertise, honors evidence, operates in a transparent manner, and this is the way to get a crisis like this under control.
Meanwhile, we understand there has been interactions, close interactions, in fact, over the past years between the China CDC and the U.S. CDC. Even on the 3rd of January, there were reportedly conversations going on between the directors of the two CDCs after China made it to the world known December 31st by informing the WHO of the virus. So various sources, do you think the White House has been using it well?
There were many reports by the U.S. intelligence agency, which was monitoring this risk. There were memos inside the White House. So this wasn't a mystery. And also, when one looks at precautions, when China locked down all of China, this was an incredible step. So anybody watching this would understand that this is extraordinarily dangerous. But unfortunately, the U.S. government did not act properly. We lost several weeks. By the time there was some kind of focus on it, the epidemic was really raging with tens of thousands of cases. The U.S. has basically gone into a kind of national lockdown now. It's really very unfortunate. We will get this under control despite the failures of the White House. I think this lockdown will reduce the number of cases, but what's important in an epidemic is that after the number of cases come down, then there has to be very, very serious public health measures to trace every potential new outbreak.
Yeah. Professor, you've been calling on the coordinated efforts of the federal government in the U.S. Have a general approach to COVID-19 now and also in the future, even talking about the exit strategy. That's one area, but the other area is what is the relationship, as we have been hearing, the argument between the White House and also, for example, the city of New York, the state of New York, about, federal and the local level authorities regarding public health issues.
What I make of it is that there's very little systematic and scientific discussion taking place in politics between the federal government and the states. So the state governments have no confidence in the statements that are being made in Washington. And they are saying, we're not listening to the president when he simply makes statements that are not supported by evidence, not supported by science, not supported by clear explanations and judgments. So the governors are saying they have responsibility for their states, and they don't trust the President of the United States. As I say, it's very sad because the United States is a country filled with wonderful scientists.
Right.
You know, we have thousands of universities. We have tremendous scientific capacity. But if the politicians ignore it, don't use it, then it does not work when the crisis comes.
But, you know, if you look at some of the other countries, some in Europe also, people also argue whether there has been appropriate measures being taken at the right time or timely measures being taken. What's your take?
In general, no. Both the U.S. and the European countries did not do well. One of the reasons, I think, is that in Asia, the memory of SARS from 2003 remains very strong. SARS was very frightening, and it led to a lot of changes in public policy and in the public health systems all through East Asia. When this epidemic broke out, the idea that this was like SARS, even more dangerous because it spreads in a nastier way, it doesn't give evidence beforehand when it's spreading like SARS did, so it's harder to control. It made the countries of East Asia go on high alert, especially after January 23rd, when China began really cracking down. I think all through East Asia, the dangers were very clear. But in the US and in Europe, this seemed far away. It didn't seem like a direct threat. And our public health systems are not on alert the way they should be.
We've been seeing nationalistic voices in various countries around the world, all kinds of economies that have been becoming ever louder. Do you think voices like that of yours, Professor Sachs, that are calling for cooperation, is going to prevail this time? Are you very optimistic about that?
I think that cooperation is our only way forward, certainly in this epidemic. But you know, in geopolitics, one of the games of the United States is to create divisions and to say, China's on one side, we're on another side, you have to pick sides and so forth. This is an old playbook. It's an extremely dangerous playbook. We don't want the world divided. It's going to serve nobody to have a divided world. And so we should understand, especially at this moment of crisis, to be mutually accountable and responsible. And we need global cooperation. And Trump, of course, has also been an enemy of global cooperation. He's the man of trade wars, technology wars, making division, taking the United States out of international treaties, now stopping payments for WHO at the height of a global crisis unprecedented in our lifetimes. But I hope that other countries will rise to the occasion. You know, one basic idea that I really would like to emphasize is that it is not only China that has done a good job of controlling the epidemic, but to many neighbors as well. Korea, Japan, Singapore, and other countries, Vietnam also. And I hope that the countries of East Asia could really step up cooperation right now, because we're still in an extraordinarily dangerous moment for the world, not only the U.S. and Europe, as we've been talking about, but Africa and South Asia
Absolutely.
and Latin America, because the fate of the world is still at stake right now.
Do you think that after the U.S. and Europe coming out of this crisis, I mean, at least this wave of coronavirus, we don't know how many waves will come before a vaccine could be available. But having said that, if they come out of it, would they be able to help, or there's likely to be an increasing reluctance of looking outward, but rather only looking inward?
Well, I'm afraid that in the United States right now, we're in the most aggressive anti-multilateral stance of modern times. Now it stands mostly in opposition to the international system. It attacks the United Nations, it attacks the World Trade Organization, it attacks the Paris Climate Agreement, and this is Trump's politics. Trump, remember, is America first, America first, America first. It's a very dangerous and naive approach to the world. I've written a book recently about it, about this kind of American exceptionalism, which says America doesn't have to play by the rules. I'm very much concerned and don't believe it's going to change soon.
Jeffrey Sachs, Professor of Economics and Director of the Center for Sustainable Development with Columbia University. Professor, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you also for your straightforwardness in your comments and also for being a globalist all the time. Jeffrey Sachs, speaking out. And that is all the time we have for today. To find out more, you can search World Insight CGTN or check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook accounts. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone on the team, thanks for watching. Bye for now.